Robert Gagne is an American psychologist, an educational psychologist who studied psychology in high school as well as in college. Robert Gagne was a American educational psychologist. He studied psychology in high school and he was the valedictorian of his high school. He went on to Yale University and earned his bachelor's degree. From there, he went to Brown University and earned his master's and his PhD in psychology. Gagne was also a professor at several colleges and universities throughout his career, including Pennsylvania State University, Connecticut College for Women, and Princeton University. He was a director for the U.S. Air Force in the Perceptual and Motor Skills Lab. He also designed a computer-based program for training pilots for the Air Force. He was also an instructor in the military while he was working in between professorships. He found his forever home as a professor at Florida State University. Robert Gagne is an educational psychologist who focused on how theory should be applied to practice. One of his most renowned works is Conditions of Learning, which he published in 1965. He went on to publish 4 editions of this book. He also published another book titled Essentials of Learning for Instruction, published in 1974. He worked with many renowned educational psychologists like Briggs and Driscoll on other works that involve learning theories and educational practices. He developed computer-based training for the military as well, and he conducted research and wrote articles while working at Princeton involving mathematics education. He has received many awards, including the American Psychological Association Scientific Award for Application of Psychology. He also earned the Educational Technology Person of the Year Award, Professor Emeritus of Florida State University, Robert O. Loudon Distinguished Professorship Award at Florida State University, American Educational Research Association Pi Delta Kappa Award for Distinguished Educational Research, and he was the AECT Outstanding Educator and Researcher Award that year. Gagne developed his 5 categories of learning. He felt that all learning fell under one of these 5 categories: intellectual skills, cognitive strategies, verbal information, motor skills, and attitudes. The 5 categories of learning fall under 3 domains: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. During intellectual skills, you would be getting your defined concepts, your rules, your problem solving skills, moving from concrete concepts to defined concepts. And during cognitive strategies, these are the strategies that students or adult learners would use to keep track of their learning and to organize their thoughts and to help them retrieve information that they've previously learned. Verbal information would be those factual recall, memory skills that we use to communicate and give names to objects. Motor skills falls under the psychomotor cognitive domain that requires our physical actions to complete a task or to complete a project. Attitudes is what falls under the affective domain, and that everyone's attitude is going to be different when completing a task. So each person is going to have a different attitude or motivation in completing a task, which can affect their learning. One of Robert Gagne's biggest influences on instructional design is his creation of the 9 events of instruction. As seen here, there are 9 steps to follow through that would that you would continue to cycle throughout your course or your instruction. The first step is to gain attention of the learner. This is to help increase motivation to learn by showing how the learner has to break up the information into a practical purpose. This is sometimes called priming or an icebreaker activity, but it is deeper than that. We want to give the student a problem or somehow tie it to their day to day life to gain their attention and wanting to be involved in this learning. The second step is to explain the objectives. These are known to be beneficial to state these to the students before learning has occurred and also make them less formal. So when stating an objective, you would want to put it in student-friendly language or often pose it as a question. The third event of instruction is to stimulate recall of prior knowledge. This is a way for learners to attach the new learning to previous learning and previous brain schema. Once they have the prior knowledge at the forefront, they then can change that prior knowledge or adapt that prior knowledge to what the new learning activity is going to bring, or they might just add on to their previous brain schema around that concept. The fourth step is to present the material, which would be the teaching of the material. And you would want to sequence and chunk the material in a way that's going from less complex to more complex using scaffolding. Also, you want to use frequent knowledge checks like asking questions or short questions and answer response. The fifth step is providing guidance. This is when modeling is key. The teacher would want to model tasks, perform tasks, and solve problems for the students using think alouds, using the actual materials that are going to be used by the learner to model and present a way in which the learner will solve the task or be able to solve the task. Step 6 is elicit performance. This is for the teacher to allow time for the student to practice the new skill. This should be a practical application, a real world application or scenario with the learning using hands-on as much as possible to help the student perform the task that you would want them to be learning. Step 7 is to provide feedback. Feedback should be ongoing from the state of step 4 when you're presenting material and providing guidance. So you would want your feedback to be ongoing, but your feedback should definitely be happening after the performance and should be specific to the instruction and the objective and how the student can reach the objective better. Step 8 would be assessing the performance. Now that is when you would have a summative assessment to see if learning has taken place after completing all the learning activities and being provided with feedback and opportunity to correct that work. The last step is to enhance transfer of the knowledge. So this is connecting the learning that took place to their day-to-day lives or to the real-world situation in that field of study. The 9 events of instruction greatly influenced instructional design because Robert Gagne was one of the first to actually implement a step-by-step process in which others could follow to develop training and educational courses. This was used by the military and public school systems widely. He was heavily influenced in both the military and the world of academia as being a professor, but he also used a lot of these ideas that were then brought over to military trainings and military programs. So he was also one of the first to create a computer-based program system for training pilots in the Air Force. So he is also a leader in like the technology field as well for education, because he was one of the first to develop a computer-based program to help with learning and to aid in learning and to provide a simulation of the real world experience of piloting. So his application of the 9 events of instruction heavily influence instructional design after him, and a lot of instructional design models still use his 9 events of instruction as a foundation for their theory. Gagne's approach to learning uses a blend of behavioral and cognitive theories. He believed that the best way to measure or know if learning has occurred is to see if there was a change in performance before and after the learning activity took place. If there hasn't been a change in the student's performance, then learning has not occurred. You can see that that is using a behaviorist approach and being able to measure whether learning has occurred, and also a cognitive approach in that he does believe that tasks do take a hierarchy throughout learning, as starting with simple to complex things as problem solving. He has been influenced and used a lot of the work of Marzano and Bloom when he was developing his own theories, while Marzano and Bloom focused more on the levels of complexity of learning. He had a kind of a broader approach to thinking of what are the conditions of learning, what is going to make up a environment and a condition in which learning can take place. He postulate that a proof of learning was shown by learners' performance change. And he also felt that a change was necessary to show that learning has occurred. He also believed that capabilities already exist in a learner before any new learning begins, and that makes up a learner's internal conditions. And then learners also have external conditions that include the outside stimuli, the teacher, the environment, and the situation. That means that with each new learning experience, learners are coming from a different point of prior learning and will also be experiencing a different external situation depending on the learner and the learning environment. So he definitely took a blend of behavioral approaches as well as cognitive approaches in what learning is and how learning can occur. In this graph, there is a hierarchy of learning, and you can see the lower complexity level activities have more of the behavioral aspects to them: signal learning, stimulus response, psychomotor connections to learning, or verbal associations. Then moving up to multiple discrimination, concept learning, principle learning, and problem solving, which would fall more under the cognitive domain and higher order thinking. That concludes my presentation on Robert Gagne. I hope that you learned a lot about his 9 events of instruction and his design around an influence on instructional design. He has been a major influencer on current instructional designers as well as past instructional designers. He had a very strong influence in practicing theory and applying theory to the real world. And I also included a few links on here where there was some good resources on how to use the 9 events of instruction. Thank you.